I've been staying in that suite for 6 years. Whatever name is on the booking tonight, make the adjustment. That's what you're here for." Tobias Crane heard the voice before he saw the face. He was standing at the far end of the front desk at Ridgeline Lodge, setting his worn canvas duffel on the polished floor and steering his daughter Isla a little closer to his side. The lobby smelled of cedar and something warm. Pine resin, maybe, or the wood burning low in the fireplace across the room. Through the floor-to-soiling windows at the far end of the hall, the mountains were going gold in the last of the evening light, the lake below them still and dark as a mirror left face down on the earth. Isla pressed 2 fingers against his arm without saying anything. She had noticed the voice, too. Tobias Crane was 38 years old. He was wearing a faded gray Henley under an old canvas jacket he'd owned since graduate school, dark jeans that had seen better days, and a pair of hiking boots with a repaired sole. His hair needed cutting. His hands were rough in the way that came from working with physical materials for a long time. Drafting, measuring, building. He did not look by any conventional measure like someone who had booked Suite 14 at one of the most sought-after mountain lodges in Banff. But he had, 3 months earlier on Isla's birthday, he had booked it for this exact weekend, her 9th birthday trip, their first proper holiday together since her mother died 2 winters ago. He had the confirmation email saved in 3 separate places. The woman at the center of the commotion was named Margaux Fenton. She was the chief executive of a national retail chain, and she moved through the lobby in a white wool coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent, followed by a younger woman carrying 2 bags and a garment holder. Margaux was not angry exactly. She was the kind of person who had learned that controlled impatience worked better than anger. It gave people less to push against. She was speaking to Stuart Brennan, the property manager, in the tone of someone explaining something obvious to someone who should already know it. Stuart Brennan was 44, recently promoted, and deeply conscious of the fact that Margaux Fenton's corporate account represented more annual revenue than he wanted to calculate in front of her. He was nodding in a way that made his agreement visible from across the lobby. Tobias watched this exchange for a moment. Then he stepped forward and introduced himself to the clerk at his end of the desk, a young man named Miles Osey who had the look of someone on his 4th month on the job, still working out which situations required a script and which required him to think. Miles pulled up the reservation, confirmed the name in the room, and was about to hand over the key cards when Stuart appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Crane." Stuart's smile was the kind that arrived before the bad news. "I'm glad I caught you. There's been a complication with your booking." Tobias held out the confirmation on his phone. "Suite 14, 2 nights, checked in this evening. No complications noted when I booked." Stuart glanced at the screen and then away from it. "Our system flagged an error in the reservation assignment. Suite 14 has some maintenance requirements we weren't able to address in time for your arrival. We'd like to offer you one of our standard rooms on the 3rd floor. Complimentary upgrade from the base rate, of course." Tobias said he would like to see the maintenance report. Stuart said the report was internal documentation. Tobias asked whether the standard room had a lake view. Stuart said it had a partial mountain view. Tobias looked at Miles, who was staring very carefully at the desk surface. Then he looked across the lobby, where Margaux Fenton was tucking her card away and speaking to her assistant. Stuart followed his gaze and quickly looked back. "Mr. Crane, I want to assure you that the room we're offering is completely—" "My daughter and I booked that suite for a specific reason," Tobias said. He kept his voice even and unhurried. "We drove 4 hours to be here. I'd like you to document the operational reason for this reassignment in writing before we accept any alternative." Stuart's expression cooled slightly. He said that wasn't something the hotel provided as standard practice. Tobias said he understood and that he was noting the refusal. From across the lobby, Margaux had turned to look at them. She took in Tobias's jacket, his boots, the duffel on the floor, and Isla standing close to his side with her small navy backpack and her quiet eyes. Something in Margaux's expression settled into a kind of satisfaction, the way a person looks when a situation has resolved the way they expected. She said loudly enough that it carried, "People don't usually dress for the mountain drive when they're actually staying in the mountain suite." She smiled at Stuart. "He can have my old room. I won't be needing it." A couple near the fireplace looked up from their drinks. The clerk at the other end of the desk pretended to be busy. Miles Osey did not move. Isla's fingers found the edge of Tobias's jacket. She looked up at him with an expression he had been dreading since the moment the first voice cut across the lobby. Not anger, not embarrassment. Just a child's honest confusion, the kind that assumes until proven otherwise that adults mean well and situations make sense. She said in a very small voice, "Did we come to the wrong place, Dad? Did I get it mixed up?" The lobby was quiet enough that several people heard her. Tobias crouched down so their eyes were level. He kept his hand on her shoulder and told her she had not mixed anything up. He told her they were exactly where they were supposed to be. He said it the way he had learned to say things since Isla's mother died. Not quickly, not to comfort her into silence, but slowly enough that she could actually hear it. He stood back up. He looked at Stewart's name badge, then at the printed desk placard showing the property manager's title. He noted the time on the lobby clock. He looked at the screen where Miles had pulled up the reservation, and he could see at the edge of the frame that the room assignment field was already showing a different number. He had not consented to any change. He did not say this. He picked up his duffel, took Isla's hand, and asked Miles to tell them the way to the third floor. Miles gave them directions in a voice that was very nearly steady. The room on the third floor had one window that looked out toward the parking area, and, past it, a sliver of tree line. Isla stood at the window for a long time without saying anything. She had been so careful all drive up, asking questions about the lake, about whether they could rent a canoe in the morning, about whether the lodge had the kind of hot chocolate that came with real whipped cream. She had been managing her own excitement the way 9-year-olds do when something means a great deal to them, and they've learned from loss not to want things too loudly. She didn't say anything now either. She set her backpack down on the bed closest to the window and sat beside it. Tobias sat on the other bed. He looked at his daughter. He thought about the year and a half since Karen died, about the school mornings and the grocery trips, and the evenings when Isla went quiet in ways he was still learning to read. He thought about booking this trip, the specific suite, the specific view, the specific lake that Karen had always said she wanted to visit before she got too tired to make the drive. He picked up his phone. He did not call anyone. He did not post anything or search for anything. He opened his email, typed 3 sentences, and sent them to 2 people. Then he put the phone face down on the bedspread. He told Isla they would figure out dinner and that the hot chocolate question was still very much on the table. She smiled just a little. That was enough for now. Bernard Lau arrived at Ridgeline Lodge at 7:15, as he often did during his quarterly walkthroughs, unannounced, coming through the side entrance, carrying nothing but a notebook. He was the regional vice president of Ridgeline Hotels and Resorts, responsible for 4 properties across Alberta, and he had a professional habit of moving through a lobby like a guest rather than a senior executive. He noticed things, maintenance details, staff posture, the way a check-in line moved. He stopped at the front desk and spoke with Stewart for a few minutes. Routine questions. Stewart, visibly relieved to have an authority figure to report to, mentioned that the evening's check-in had gone smoothly. A minor room adjustment for a priority corporate guest. He named the account. Bernard asked which guest had been moved. Stewart gave the name. Bernard was quiet for a moment that lasted long enough for Stewart to start to look uncertain. Bernard asked Stewart to repeat the name. Stewart did. Bernard closed his notebook. He asked Miles Osei, very calmly, for the room number on the 3rd floor. Miles told him without hesitation. Bernard thanked him and walked to the elevator. He knocked on the door of room 312. Tobias opened it in the same jacket, the same boots. Behind him, Isla was sitting cross-legged on the bed with a sketchbook open across her knees, drawing something with a focus that suggested she had decided to make the best of the window. Bernard said, "Mr. Crane, I had no idea you were coming this weekend." Tobias stepped into the hallway and pulled the door to behind him. He did not ask for his suite back. He did not describe what had happened to him in the way that invited sympathy or outrage. He asked Bernard 4 questions. Whether the hotel's reservation guarantee covered confirmed bookings regardless of guest loyalty status, whether a property manager had authority to override a confirmed booking without documenting an operational justification, whether the hotel's policy permitted staff to reassign a room that was in active use as a guest family's primary accommodation, and whether a guest's physical appearance had ever been discussed in Bernard's training materials as a legitimate factor in room assignment decisions. Bernard did not answer any of the questions. He had read the email on the drive over, 3 sentences, 2 recipients, no signature required. He thanked Tobias and walked back to the elevator. What happened at the front desk after that took less than 15 minutes. Bernard asked Stewart to walk through the evening's reservation log. Stewart did. Bernard asked why the log showed a modification at 6:47 p.m. to a booking that had been active and confirmed since early spring. Stewart said he had identified a maintenance issue. Bernard asked to see the maintenance record. Stewart said it hadn't been formally logged yet. Bernard asked whether the modification had been made before or after Margaux Fenton arrived at the desk. Stewart said the timing was coincidental. Bernard asked Miles Osei to describe what he had seen during the check-in. Miles was 24 years old and had been working at Ridgeline Lodge for 4 months. He had grown up in Edmonton in a family that had not spent a lot of time in hotels like this one, and he was still learning the particular kind of authority that came with the uniform. He had felt sick watching what happened to Tobias and Isla, and he had not known what to do about it, and that helplessness had been sitting in his chest all evening. When Bernard asked him to describe what he'd seen, Miles told the truth, all of it. He described the confirmation on Tobias's phone. He described the moment Stewart appeared and the way he'd angled the screen away. He described Margaux's comment about the mountain drive and about what kinds of people stayed in the suite. He described the little girl's question, "Did we come to the wrong place?" and the way it had fallen into the lobby like something dropped from a height. Bernard listened without interrupting. He then asked Stewart whether Margaux Fenton's comment had influenced his decision. Stewart said she was a priority corporate client and he had used his discretion. Bernard said that discretion that produced discriminatory outcomes was not discretion the hotel was in the business of extending. He said this quietly, without drama, the way people say things they have considered for a long time. He suspended Stewart's access pending a full review. He asked a senior supervisor to take over the desk. He thanked Miles and asked him to make himself available for a formal statement in the morning. Then he went to Suite 14 and knocked on the door. Margaux Fenton answered in a hotel bathrobe with her hair down, a glass of sparkling water in one hand. She looked at Bernard and then past him at the 2 managers standing in the hallway, and her expression shifted through several things quickly before it settled on cold composure. Bernard told her the suite had been allocated to her in error, and that the hotel was obligated to return it to the guest whose confirmed reservation had been displaced. He said her current booking would be honored in a standard suite at no charge, and that her corporate account would be reviewed in light of the evening's events. Margaux told him he was making a serious mistake. Bernard said the mistake had already been made, and that he was trying to correct it. She left the suite 20 minutes later, her assistant trailing behind with the garment bag. Tobias and Isla came back down to the lobby with their bags. Isla had not been told much, only that there had been a mix-up and it had been sorted out. She did not ask questions. She held her backpack straps with both hands and looked around the lobby the way children look at places they have decided to like. Suite 14 was waiting for them, the key cards at the desk, the lake black and silver outside the windows, and the mountains dark against a sky that had gone from amber to a deep, clear, dark blue. They were in the suite for less than an hour. Tobias had gone down to the lobby to ask about dinner reservations when he saw the couple at the front desk. The man was perhaps 75, in a dress shirt with a collar button he'd missed. The woman beside him was in a wheelchair, wrapped in a blue cardigan, her hands folded in her lap with a patience that looked well-practiced. The man was explaining to the night clerk, in the careful, apologetic tone of someone who does not want to be a bother, that the accessible lakeside room they had booked for their anniversary had shown as unavailable when they arrived, and they had been given a room on the 2nd floor that had steps up to the bathroom. The night clerk was typing. She looked sorry and also stuck. Tobias stood at the edge of the desk for a moment. He listened. He looked at the man's missed button, and the woman's folded hands, and the garment bag hanging from the back of the wheelchair that held, he guessed, something they had brought for a special occasion. He walked over and introduced himself. He asked the man how far they'd driven. Calgary, the man said, 7 hours with stops. 52 years married this weekend. Tobias spoke quietly with the night clerk, and then he spoke with the couple, and then he went back upstairs and told Isla to pack her things. She looked at him. He told her what he'd seen downstairs. He told her about the drive from Calgary and the steps up to the bathroom and the garment bag. Isla was quiet for a moment. Then she got up and started putting her sketchbook back in her backpack. Bernard arranged for Tobias and Isla to have a room in the lodge's east wing. Nothing special, a double on the 2nd floor with a partial view of the spruce trees and past them a corner of the mountain. Miles Osei was still on shift and brought extra blankets up himself, unprompted, because the night was getting cold and because he had needed to do something. After the lights were out, Isla spoke from the other bed. She asked whether he was sad about giving the suite away. Tobias said no. She thought about this. She said they never even got to try the hot chocolate in the nice room. He said that was a genuine loss. She was quiet for another moment, and then she said the couple downstairs had looked so happy when he talked to them. She'd watched from the elevator. She said the woman had reached up and taken the man's hand. Tobias didn't say anything. Isla said, "Is this the good part, Dad? Like, is this the part we'll remember?" The wind moved through the spruce outside the window. Somewhere far off, something called out once across the mountain dark. Tobias thought about Karen, who would have had an answer for that faster and better than anything he could manage. He thought about the drive up and the way Isla had pressed her face close to the window when they entered the park, and the mountains had come into view and she'd said quietly, as if to herself, "Oh, just that. Oh," like the mountains had finally confirmed something she'd suspected. He told Isla yes. She settled under the blankets. A few minutes later, her breathing evened out and she was asleep. Tobias lay in the dark, listening to the wind. He thought about the couple from Calgary in Suite 14, the lake outside their window, the garment bag with whatever they'd brought for their anniversary. He thought about Miles Osei at the front desk, saying, "I saw what happened," and choosing to say it anyway. He thought about Stuart Brennan, and about the kind of authority that only recognizes people after learning their title, and about how that kind of authority was the least reliable kind, because it required the world to keep performing its credentials, every day, in every room, just to earn what it was already owed. He thought about his daughter asleep 3 feet away, who had asked him if this was the good part, and who would grow up understanding something about that question that he was still learning himself. The wind moved through the spruce, the mountain dark held its silence. Tomorrow they would find the hot chocolate. They would find the lake. They would rent a canoe if the morning was calm enough, and Isla would drag her hand through the cold water and watch the mountains slide past above them, upside down in the surface of the lake. That was enough. That was in every way that mattered, everything.